human beings are very bad, I would almost say notorious, in our ability to understand, evaluate and plan for risk, right? We just can't understand risk. We will worry about completely unnecessary things. For example, I think it is more risky to walk on the roads or even drive in while looking at your mobile phone. It is definitely far riskier, and I know people who wear headphones and cross the tracks. I think it's an amazingly big mistake. And I have read the interview of an engine driver in Mumbai saying, I saw a girl crossing the tracks with a headphone and I knew I could do nothing. She was obviously blown to pieces. And here he was honking and she just didn't hear. So these are kind of risks which we take without even understanding. Similarly, even while investing, we think risk is, oh my God, I've seen during Harshad Mehta time how much money my father, grandfather, elder brother lost, right? Something like that. Or to worry, read and say, do you know that the unemployment during the Great Depression was 80%? It was not 80%, it was something like 20%, right? 25%. So it is not to say, and also remember during the Great Depression of 1920s, not too much of US was investing in equity markets. Yes, it was depression, the markets fell, people lost money, there is no doubt. But if you sit and quantify, which we can, if you were in 1929 invested, I don't know how we would have reacted. But today in the retrospect, when you sit and analyze, it was not too bad after all. In fact, I have done a video on all the great market crashes. They were not as bad as it is made out to be. Some were very deep, some were very shallow and recovered very well. Sometimes it took 7 years for the market to come back. Sometimes it took 18 months for the market to come back. All these things happened internationally, domestically, everything, right? 1992 to 2002, the market may have gone up 0% or minus 5% or minus 10%. 10-year period, such a poor return. But today I don't think that risk is something to worry about, simply because the central banks of the world will not allow that to happen. Look at Japan, 30 years no return, right? Structural market problems. We worry about things which we don't have to worry about. We worry about what will happen when this happens, what will happen when that happens. You know, for example, I think it is far more risky to walk the roads with your phone and walking like this, and it's very common to see people walking like this. I held the hand of a girl who was about to walk into a tree branch, right? There was a low hanging branch and she was walking there. I was there and I just held her hand, obviously maybe in her 20s, and she said thanks and moved on. But these kind of risks people take without even understanding that they are taking risks. Similarly, while investing, people worry about what happens if the market falls. Look, volatile asset classes give better returns, but on the face of it, it looks far more risky. For example, equity looks risky, real estate looks risky, but these returns could be higher than what you can get maybe in a savings bank account or in a bank fixed deposit, which does not look risky, right? So what is risky and what looks risky are completely different. So even the way data is given to you, telling you that drive carefully is different, but I think it has a greater impact if there is a board put there saying 800 people died last year on this road, right? So that has a greater impact of delivering. It's a fantastic nudge to say drive carefully. But do we see driving as a risk? Not really. Not too many people see driving as a risk. Not too many people see air travel as a risk. Not too many people see, many of those things are risky, yes, but far less risky than many of the other things that you do, right? For example, a friend of mine who is a doctor says the risk of a bad injection is much greater than the advantages of getting a medical checkup done. So don't get your medical checkup done every year, get it done once in 3 years. That's good enough. The risk in Indian labs of getting a bad needle, or I don't know, that's what he says. So I don't agree, because whenever you go, you see them break a new needle, and I don't know what is the risk, but he said that is more risky. So obviously his understanding of risk may not be too great, because he said anesthesia is risky. I said, is it riskier than air travel? He said, of course yes. Then there was data to prove that he was wrong. So there are times when he says things which I may or may not believe, but yes, there was this chance that sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong, but the fluctuation in equities is much lesser risk than the poor return in debt over long periods of time. So over 30-40 years, it does not really matter that equity fluctuates or there is a high standard deviation. Doesn't matter if you're going to look at it only after 30 years. You invested when you were 30 and you're going to look at it only when you're 70. So for 40 years you don't have to worry, then don't have to worry about volatility risk. You keep doing an SIP, right? Equity is risky. Yes, equity is risky. If you do lump sum in equity in a single share which you don't know what to do with, yes, it is risky. But is it risky if you do an SIP in a large cap fund or in a balanced advantage fund or a multi-asset fund over the next 30-40 years? I don't see that as risky. In fact, I think not investing in equity is more risky than investing in equities and not looking at it on a regular basis, right? So any risk that you talk about, people talk about risk but don't understand risk. Secondly, also the risk of death was very high in times when man was a hunter-gatherer, right? So when you saw an animal far away and you didn't know whether it was a deer or a lion, it made sense to go up the tree and wait there and then waiting for the animal to go away. If it turned out to be a lion, you said, oh, better safe, I'm safe because of this. And if it was a deer, then you coined the word saying better safe than sorry. But today in your portfolio, you don't have that lion kind of a risk. A lion would come and just devour you or just kill you. Definitely, for sure, it will kill you. Whether it eats you then or whether the jackals eat you doesn't really matter. But today in equity, if you are worried about risk and you are 60% in equity at your age of 60, maybe you sell off 2%, maybe you sell off 3%, maybe you sell off next 3 years expenses and put it in a money market fund or a liquid fund, right? That's what you can do. So if you are in the US, you need to protect yourself more than you to protect yourself in India, simply because you expect more bank bankruptcies in the US than in India, because India is much better and more tightly regulated. So if you have money in the US, you know 250,000 US dollar is what you are going to get protected by FDIC. So you are much better that in India you keep money in maybe 2-3 banks, but your money market, your liquid funds and all are much safer in India, I think, than in the US, where you can expect more defaults. So where does the risk come from? Risk comes from various sources. Risk comes from not taking risk, right? So that is also risk. Investors are really worried more about market volatility than getting a poor return constantly over a long period of time. When there is a 20% or a 30% drawdown, you say, oh my God, look what has happened. Nothing has happened. Market will recover if you don't react and panic. If you don't withdraw money when the market is panicking, that itself will keep you protected. In fact, if you invest more when the market is down, maybe you will get even better returns, right? The biggest risk, I think, is not investing in equity at all. And that is because the less volatile assets give you lesser returns. Gold does not give you great returns, even though the immediate returns over the last, say, 2-3 years has been fantastic. A lot of central banks are buying gold, they are hoarding gold, they are taking their gold away from US and UK and keeping it in their own lockers, right? Those are again perceptions of risk. Just buying bonds and keeping money in bank fixed deposit does not really help. The current value, okay, look at it this way, the current value of inflation in India is about 5 to 6%. So 6% means in 12 years your expenses will double, right? That's what happens with inflation at 6%. Maybe inflation applicable to you is 9% because you're using a lot of servants and servant salaries are growing up at a faster rate than 6%. Have you ever seen any servant salary go up by 6%? A person earning 3,000 comes and says, give me 3,180. Never happens. It goes from 3,000 to 4,000. That's how the salaries jump. Or whether it's your driver, whether it's your maid, whether it's your cook, those salaries can go up much faster. So inflation is a risk. If you don't protect against inflation, that is a bigger risk, right? So if you are a retired person with adequate money, you still have to provide for inflation for 30-40 years, right? So that is something which your money gets at 6% inflation, your money gets cut in half in 12 years. The number one risk for retirees is clear that their living expenses could gallop much faster than the rate of return that you are getting on your portfolio, especially after your age of 80-85, when you may not be playing an active role. So you may have shifted to annuities, bank deposits, etc. So then you have to worry about how long that money has to last, right? So risk keeps changing from person to person. The risk for a 22-year-old is that person is not saving enough. Not saving enough is the risk for the 20-year-old, and solidity of portfolio and stability of portfolio is the risk for the 80-year-old. So I think they need to read about risk and talk about risk, and understand risk is very important both for the investor and for their advisors. Thank you.